What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Die Hard MMA podcast. It is Monday, and we are here to discuss UFC Vegas 31. We're breaking the entire card down, top to bottom, once again, like we always do on the show. But boy, I got to tell you guys, I am trying to pick myself up today off of the floor. It was an awful weekend. I got wiped at UFC Vegas. UFC 264. It was not good for me from a betting perspective. And we dropped about 8 units on that spot. We will do a quick recap of last week's card, but do want to let you know that sets the bar, I think, for 2021 worst losing event so far. And after going on a fantastic run, 3, 4, 5 weeks in a row where things were either good little wins or just breaking even, slight losses, just chipping away, doing good shit, hit the plus 13 unit mark. We drop 8 of them all in one night and just wipe it all off the board. It doesn't feel good. It does not feel good. But luckily, I've got you all here with me in the chat today to help pick me up. We're going to look forward ahead to this weekend's card and try to get that cash back, right? We're going to try and correct the ship, right things here, and get it going where it needs to be. We've got 56 live viewers in the chat already. Thank you all so much for being here with me again. Make sure you smash that like button for me. Share this bad boy out on whatever your social media platform is so that we can get the ball rolling here. We've got Muhammad Boston in the chat. Grateful dude. I'm ready to bounce back as well, buddy. Manel, that machine. DFS by the numbers. Happy Rodolfo Vieira fight week. Indeed, my friend. The same to you. Uncle Weezy tuning in with my guy. We've got Joseph Nussbaum, Mark Unkefer, Michael Hunter. Okay. We've got Sean V. I don't know why. Seen, and when people spell Sean, S-E-A-N, my brain still says Seen instead of Sean. I mean, I've known Sean's for literally my entire adult life, and I still do that first. Gramps is in the chat. Nigel Lee, Dan Goldstein, Dave Creek, Hype Killer MMA, Ali Aquamil. We've got Voodoo Viz. All right, everybody. How's everybody doing? Thank you all so much for being here with me. We're going to go ahead and recap UFC 264. We might as well talk about it. A lot happened and a lot of things from a betting perspective happened. So before we do that, though, I want to just welcome in my guest, the man himself, Dan Tom MMA, joining us on the show. Dan, buddy, how you doing?
Good, man. It's great to be back here chatting with you. I had a blast last time, so of course I was going to jump all over another opportunity to come on and talk some fights with you, Clint.
Hell yeah, man. It was a ton of fun the last time you were on. We definitely wanted to make sure we got you on again as quick as possible. So thank you very much for accepting the invitation. And hey, how'd you do at UFC 264?
It was a good night, but I will say this, Clint. Let me just put this caveat here because, and not just saying this to make you feel better. I said it behind the scenes to peek back behind the curtain, and I'll gladly say it publicly now. I've had way more losing weeks in 2021 than winning ones. Sometimes that's just outright bad picks. And like Clint, which I appreciate about this show, he always talks about them. There's always great accountability and energy here, which is what I love. But sometimes you're also, I will dare say, on the bad side of variance there, right? So that can definitely happen too. And maybe we'll get to talk about a little bit of that today. But it was a good night. It could have been a lot better. But I did one of those rare things where I kind of, guaranteed profit early. And I tried doing the D word that I'm terrible at myself, Clint. It's called discipline. I'm like, let me just try this tonight because there's a lot of good fights. There could be a lot of craziness on a McGregor card, right? And even though some of the picks ended up being right, and maybe I could have made more money, you know what? I'll take the small percentage as a win and sit back on this one.
Yeah. You know what? Self-control is something that I've always struggled with, and anybody that's watched this show for any amount of time more than maybe just the last couple weeks know that I've never touted myself as a professional sports bettor. I tell you all exactly what I am betting, and I am a fully admitted complete degenerate. And man, last week at UFC 264, I talked myself into about 4 or 5 bets that realistically I just didn't need to put my money on it. I had kind of assessed them as being a little close and ended up going ahead and firing on them anyway. And that did end up costing me. But we might as well talk about the fights, man, because in hindsight, I don't know that any of them were that bad from a betting perspective. Over the long term, it's something that we will more than likely end up seeing a profit on if we just get those little coin flips to kind of go our direction. So, first fight of the night, man. Jerome Rivera, Zalgas Zumagulov. I took the shot. I took the plus 270 shot on Jerome Rivera. And reason being is the striking that kid has showed off in his last couple fights has actually been really impressive. That 6-inch height and reach advantage. And sure enough, he was basically dominating the fight with Zalgas until he got clipped with that one big shot, man. That kid's chin is just such a problem. I didn't think it was quite that bad, and for him to lose by standing guillotine, I mean, he was winning the fight until he wasn't. You know what I mean? It felt like the bet was worth it right up until he got punched.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I picked Jalgas as a parlay piece, so I was confident enough to put him in a parlay. So I will say that. That being said, was I confident in the first minute or so of that fight? No, it looked like Jalgas was getting stuck on the outside. I mean, he didn't know what to do about it. However, even though he doesn't look like the most intimidating guy on paper or through his profile picture, if you will, it's a theory I have, and we'll talk about O'Malley later on. But a lot of these lanky guys who cut a ton of weight, I feel like it either taxes their durability, whether it's their chin, their legs like O'Malley, or maybe their gas tank like a Montel Jackson. A lot of these guys from 125 to 135, these tall guys, they're so sexy to take on paper because they're anomalies. And when they actually have skill, oh my goodness, it can produce some violent stuff. However, they can also be at the end of some violent stuff because of that kind of working theory I have. So that was kind of part of the reason why I went with it. But I'd be lying if I said I was confident in that first minute, because your dog was looking live there, man.
I really thought I was onto something, man. I thought if he could just keep that pace up, everything was going to be smooth sailing, but one shot was all it took to set things right. So maybe just should have held off on a non-UFC caliber fighter in that particular spot. But the next fight, man, my best, most confident pick on the entire card, Brad Tavares. I wish that I had, and this is obviously hindsight speaking, this is results speaking, that I had just hammered Tavares harder and kind of laid off most of the rest of the card, because it went perfect to script. It was so easy, and I almost got my 15-1 round 3 finish. That last 20-30 seconds, man, he was pouring it on, and I thought I was going to cash that ticket and start the night off with a bang. So feel good about that one. Felt solid. Kind of nice to get Jerome back and get ahead by a unit that way. But really just one of those spots that I could have cashed in on and put some extra jingle in my pocket, and maybe didn't bet with the same conviction that I had in my heart that it was going to hit.
Yeah, this was a confident spot too, and maybe that's why I was confident in the previous one, fight as far as the odds go, because it was one of those rare times where you have an under 200 that you're confident enough to even parlay piece, which was Tavares. To your credit, though, the camp and Tavares himself, they were going for that finish. I know I tweeted death taxes and Tavares by decision. Brad follows me. He's actually followed my advice on some bets, so hopefully he doesn't get offended by that. They were going for the finish, to his credit and to your credit, and anybody else betting that round 3 prop. I just felt that, Akhmedov, even when he gasses, he's still really tough, man. He will survive. And Tavares, fights smart. So I just went with the decision for a bonus, and Tavares kind of made my night. Well, I went and many, went heavy, because you weren't alone, Clint. When I saw that, I was like, okay, nice. Clint's on board too. That's a good sign. And Tavares came through, man.
Yep, that one was good. That felt great. The next fight up, I got a lot of shit, man. I got a lot of shit for betting Jessica I by decision. I got plus 240 on that line. And I'll be honest with you, I will line back up and make that bet again today. That was a losing bet where I feel like I had absolutely all the value. I think you could make a very good argument for Jessica to get a 29-28 scorecard, and I didn't agree whatsoever with Jennifer Maia 30-27. I feel like that was an awful scorecard. Now, 29-28 Maia, far more likely than I 29-28. There's a lot of people out there that actually are calling robbery, saying that Jessica I won. I think that it was close. I'm not going to say that she was like a home run outright winner, but at plus 240, getting a coin flip when that fight could have gone either way on the judges' scorecards, like I said, I'll make that bet every day.
Yeah, I was a bit in transit during this fight, but from what I saw, even people who scored it for Maya or even played Maya saw arguments for Jessica I, which automatically makes it a closer fight. I know, obviously, the visual damage speaks loud to the audience and judges with that big cut that I sustained, but when you see
I was so mad at that.
from a value perspective, I know that that's what you were chasing with Jerome Rivera, but from a value perspective, with especially you're going for decisions in these female divisions where it's going to go to decision, and we have to depend on the judges who had some real questionable calls. Surprise
So
to no one,
sketchy.
right? So I mean, no hate. I'm surprised you got a lot of crap for that because that felt like a real dogger pass spot. I picked Maya, but I wasn't confident in it.
Yeah, man. Jessica I is just, she does not have the largest fan base. In fact, she's accumulated far more haters than she has fans. So people don't enjoy betting on her. And she's pretty rough around the edges, I'll be completely honest. Her style is not overly pleasing to the eye. But I knew she was going to be physically bigger. I knew that she wasn't going to get bullied around the cage like Maya can do with some people. And Maya really only had success in the real close, sharp boxing range. I kept her at range with a jab for the majority of the fight. They traded some big shots. As soon as the headbutt happened and that cut opened up on I knew that was going to be a problem, though, because even though it wasn't something Maya did herself, it wasn't damage that she inflicted, the optics was just that she was a bloody mess, and somehow Maya was the one that had caused that. So I knew that wasn't going to play out well, but like I said, I will line up and I'll make that same exact bet again today. I'm going to kind of rapid fire a little bit here, man, so we don't spend the whole night talking about UFC 264, because God knows we could with how much action was on that one. Dricus du Plessis, I will fade the shit out of Trevin Giles every opportunity you get me. I cashed on that one. Little bummed he got the knockout instead of the submission, and he did it in round 2 instead of round 3. So I was close on all the little sprinkled degenerate plays, but cashed the big main bet on the guy straight. I did pass on Topuria Hall, thank God, because I was leaning toward the over, and Topuria showed us kid's a monster. He's legitimately worth everything that he's saying, and I loved his call out after the fight. I can't wait to see him get a big step up in his next matchup. I do want to touch on Nico Price Pereira for a second. I felt like it was very similar to the I and Maya fight, where I ended up pulling the trigger on the dog there. I thought that round 1 was pretty close, pretty competitive. Round 2 was pretty obviously Pereira. Don't really like the backflip kick to the head. I'm not sure what the answer is there, because you want people to do fun, crazy, athletic things like that. I don't think he should have been disqualified or anything like that, but I do feel like it should have been a stand-up at least. I feel like they should have at least stopped the fight, said don't kick him in the head when he's on the ground, let Nico stand back up, that kind of thing. And then I did also feel like Nico had done enough in round 3 for a 10-8. I thought it was a draw. Personally, myself, I scored it as a draw. The first 2 rounds for Michelle, round 3, 10-8 for Nico, because realistically, I did tweet this out because I got a lot of hate for my 10-8 scorecard on that one. I was like, what did Michelle Pereira do in round 3 besides kick Nico in the dick? Like, that's the only thing he did that entire round, and then basically tried to survive. So I feel comfortable. I thought there was enough value there, and it was just a little unfortunate that Michelle Pereira is so damn big, Nico couldn't quite get him out of there in the 3rd round. How did you feel about that one? That one was super interesting.
As someone who bet a little on Nico Price, I was really hoping for a 10-8 too, but I knew that I was fueled with that bias, so I just scored at 29-28 Pereira live. I did hear some people saying giving credence to a possible 10-8, but also that possibly you could also argue 10-8 for Pereira. I would not argue that because, again, it was the backflip, and even if it wasn't properly adjudicated by the ref, I would like to see judges, since it's their job to judge and take things into their own hands, to kind of do that math themselves and realize that, if there was any, interpretation of Price being stunned, it came from a questionably illegal move, because we've seen refs warn guys for like axe kicking the body. They'll be like, keep that to the head.
Yeah.
And he just straight up, because it was the nature of a front flip, but there was a ton of fouls, right? But yeah, I will say I was rooting for that. Maybe there's an argument if I go back to watch it, but I guess I'm countering my own bias here because I've bet on Price.
Hey, I totally admit and understand that I was biased in that spot as well, but I will say I've seen 10-8s given out for far less. So
absolutely, yeah, sure.
That's my only argument there, is that if I can't root for a 10-8 there, we've seen a lot of questionable scorecards. I think there's an argument to be had for it. I did end up pulling the trigger on Carlos Condit. I actually thought that he fought really well against Matt Griffin, and again, that was another one where I concede 29-28, Max Griffin winning that fight, but also 29-28 Condit was not out of the question. I didn't like the 30-27 Griffin either. Almost the identical situation as some of the fights earlier in the card. So I feel like value on these dogs, again, probably should have just tightened up from a betting perspective. But all of them fought extremely well and gave me exactly the fights that I wanted them to. Fought closely, competitively. They were good fights. They were fun. I do want to touch on the main card here, man. So I don't know if you've seen, but I have become a bit of a troll on TikTok, and I put out a couple of TikToks about Sean O'Malley. And guys, if you want big numbers on your TikToks, all you got to do is make fun of Sean O'Malley, because the fanboys come out of the woodwork to defend his honor if you say anything about the guy. I literally am following, like in TikTok, it's all like music trends and stuff like that, man. I don't know how much time you spend on TikTok, but it's all fun, goofy trends and stuff like that. So I'm literally following like a set pattern of things that are popular on TikTok. And I poked fun at Sean O'Malley on one of them last week, and it got like 15,000 views. So first off, I was floored because I didn't know he had that much support on TikTok. So after he called his shot, he called the TKO, he dedicated it to the Phoenix Suns pre-fight. Everyone just looking past poor Chris Moutinho. I went ahead and made another TikTok, kind of poking a little bit of fun at Sean O'Malley for relying on Herb Dean to step in the last 20 seconds to get him the KO he dedicated to the Suns. And boy, it's already got 16,000 views on it. So I'm getting roasted all over TikTok. And all of you that follow me, all you need to know is it's all in good fun. I support fighters. I respect fighters. I actually like watching Sean O'Malley, but I gotta admit, it's pretty funny to see the outrage that I'm causing on that platform right now.
Well, I'm not allowed on TikTok for legal restraining order reason. I'm just kidding. No, O'Malley does look like he does have a lot of TikTok supporters, though. So that kind of doesn't surprise me that you swatted at that beehive and it came at you. But hey, man, hey, I can laugh at it, and I'm somebody who lost a flyer bet on a round 1 KO. I just saw some plus money there on a ridiculously inflated fight, and saw that he was going against a do or die fighter, and O'Malley kind of has that McGregor-esque. If you wanted to make a McGregor comparison, I will say that as far as getting finishes go, they both shown they can win a decision, sure, but let's be honest, the later the fight goes, it's not good for them. They're early, finish or bust. And, I will say, to borrow a phrase from you, even though it was a losing bet, at least I don't look crazy because he, a couple more seconds on the clock, a different ref, as you say, that could have been a different decision that could have cashed right there. So.
Yep. I feel you there, man. I actually, I felt pretty sharp on that one. I played the over 1.5 rounds at plus 145. Maybe my best bet of the night, besides Brad Tavares, man. Felt really good about that one. Felt like everyone was looking past Chris and just basically counting him out for dead right off the bat. So got a lot of value on that over 1.5. That helped salvage the night just a little bit. Didn't end up betting Irene Aldana. Really frustrated at myself because I pulled the trigger on, like I said, 3 or 4 other questionable spots. Didn't bet Irene, even though I said that she had a chance to finish this thing by knockout. But holy shit, I was not expecting that. She came out like a freaking banshee to get that thing done, man. That was a very intense short fight.
And you know what? I forgot to, that's a great call. And I forgot to get this on my own analysis. I may have been scared off by the bad weight cut. But, when fighters, something to pay attention to a trend, when they have a really bad nose jam up and surgery, you want to see how they come back. Maybe in Arlovsky, he doesn't care. He's a big heavyweight guy who's already fought for a couple of decades. But we've seen it with, Jessica Penne, maybe not the nose, but the eye with Josh Koscheck. When they have serious facial injuries and they don't react well, or it gets busted up really badly time and time and again, like it has with Kunitskaya, that's just going to be a flag that's forever attached to her. I'm sorry to say.
Absolutely. Good point. Very good call. I did also sprinkle a half unit on Greg Hardy by decision. I thought he was going to come out and play level-headed, kind of the way that he did against Alexander Volkov in this kind of a spot. And that one sucked because I like the value, I like the number, and if they ran it back, I kind of feel like he probably would have played more to that game plan. But as soon as he stepped into the center of the cage and pointed to the floor against Tai Tuivasa, I went, oh, that's over. The second he pointed at the floor, I'm like, bro, you're about to brawl with Tuivasa. This thing isn't going more than 3 minutes.
Yeah,
And he
yeah.
paid for it.
Yeah, man. I don't know. Did we switch hats on this one, man? I feel like usually I'm the one that's going to go contrarian and play overs here. And you're the violence guy, man. You're the violence king over there. And to be honest, I suck with unders, man. I got like probably my worst bets are with unders. I'm much better with overs, so I was really nervous on taking that shot. I just felt like the live crowd. I did feel like the leg kicks and some technical things would play, which I believe kind of helped spark it and made Hardy maybe kind of do or die a la Stipe dos Santos too, right? He didn't like how those felt, and it ensued the brawl. So, I cashed that one there, thankfully, because that helped secure it. But you're right, man. I heard a lot of people, you and others, talking about point fighting, and I'm like, yeah, Hardy's done that. But here's what I'll say before we move on from this fight. I just think we need to wipe the Hardy Volkov fight from our memories, because I think that sample size it's just going to throw us off no matter what fighter we're trying to analyze, and we come across that sample, we're all just scratching our head. I think let's all do ourselves a favor and forget about that sample size.
Man, I think one thing that that I missed, at least not we necessarily, but I definitely missed, was Hardy's mental state. I'm a guy that I look really deep into like the fighters and how they're thinking and where they at functionally. And this is maybe a perfect example for me to get on my soapbox here for a second, because a lot of people mock me for like listening to the fighter interviews and actually giving credence to what they're saying and where they're at in their heads. And Hardy was upset that people said he quit. Like, that was a big thing to him, is that from his last fight, people said that he threw in the towel and he gave up on that last fight and he quit. And then he goes out and decides to prove everyone wrong and outslug the slugger. That's the kind of thing that I should have picked up on. That's the kind of thing that I at least should have maybe not bet the fight. Like, it should have been enough for me to pass, to be like, look, he usually fights like this. Tonight he's probably not going to. So just those little things you got to pick up sometimes.
I'll co-sign with that. It just his ego alone going into it. It was like he was coming off of a win almost, which was also kind of a flag. You wanted to see the more humble and more conservative style, which would have played much more to the over players too, by the way. But yeah, I agree.
Agreed. If he came in feeling much more humbled, much more down to earth, then he probably does the same thing he always does. Sticks and moves, stays on the outside, in which case I think it goes over and I think he wins. Co-main event, man. I thought myself into a hole here, which we can all do from time to time. And I have been on the Gilbert Burns train for so long. I bet him against Kamaru Usman. As soon as I saw that plus number next to his name, I reached for the button to smash the cash on my boy Gilbert Burns. And then I pumped the brakes. And I looked into it and I went, am I loving this because I'm Gilbert's boy? Like, what's going on here? And I ended up talking myself into thinking I was kind of overhyping my own fighter. So I ended up playing fight doesn't go the distance. I thought that Thompson was going to be able to either catch him, or it would look like Gilbert Burns in round 3, where he had him in kind of a dominant position and was going to be able to pound him out of there or something. I just ended up making a bad bet because I thought levels over myself, and I put myself in a corner. Should have either stayed off it or just backed my boy. It was that simple, and I made it complicated. So I donated a little bit of money there, but I could not have been happier to see Gilbert Burns get that win. I know a lot of people are not excited to see him get another crack at Usman, but really, if you throw him in there with any of the top 5 at 170, I think it's in for one hell of a fight, and I can't wait to see what he can do.
Absolutely. I did the opposite of you. I corrected the steering wheel the other way. I just steered straight into my bias. I just went into the center median, I skipped the fast lane. I just wrecked in the center median because I went against my thing. And, sometimes I'll see these sharp MMA bettors and handicappers that grab those early lines. And I'm like, oh, wow, you got that line? And that's so not me, because I'm such a process guy and I'm a week-to-week guy and yada, yada. We could have a whole conversation of that, me and you, Clint. But I got to stick to that process, right? And I know that if I bet early, not only could it put me on the wrong side, but whether I'm writing or talking about fights, which is my job, I'm going to be spouting off that bias because I'm going to be subconsciously backing my pick.
Absolutely.
We see this done a lot, and I try to be responsible, with people following my content. So I want to be as non-biased as possible, but I made a mistake, man. The open wonder boy, my boy, had an underdog price, and I couldn't help it. I did the one thing I never do, and I didn't see the conservative and maybe not the most fan friendly route, but a very realistic and smart route for Burns. So props to Burns there and anybody who bet him.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Here comes the part where it's all pain for me, Dan. It's all pain for me. So I had a bit of a hot take on this main event, and I felt like these guys have been so tough, so durable in the majority of their fights. I know that sounds weird because they both finished each other essentially in round one in their previous fights, but this trilogy is so massive. All the cards on the table. I really thought these guys were going to fight not to lose. You know what I mean? Like it all came down to this moment. And because of that, it was going to, these guys were going to dig deep. They weren't going to go away easy. They were going to play safe. They were going to find certain positions where they potentially would have been in trouble in previous fights and maybe take it a little slower in this one. So I bet the overs. I went over 1.5, and Dan, I hit it hard. I had 3.5 units on the over 1.5. I played the over 2.5 at plus money, and then I played the over 3.5 at a big plus price because I really felt like these guys were just going to absolutely go to war in the main event. And I couldn't, I'm screaming at my TV for Conor not to get up at the end of round one because I knew something stupid was going to happen. I just had that gut feeling that if he gets to his feet at the end of round one, something's going to go wrong. And then his leg snaps in half. Like, if he just stays on the ground for 15 seconds and we get to round two, I know there's a potential that maybe his leg was already cracked, and maybe if the fight continues, he gets hit with like a low calf kick and it snaps in half in round two, or he goes back to the leg kicks and does it himself. There's a lot of shit that could have gone wrong for the rest of the fight. But the way he stepped on his foot was such an awkward angle that like snapped his leg in half that way. I feel like there's a very real possibility that he gets up, they go back to their corners, and their coach, his coach essentially bitch slaps and goes, "Don't jump guillotine on Dustin Poirier, you freaking retard." And then he never does that again. And then, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. I was going to say moron. That was a bad term. I'm sorry. But you know what I'm saying? Like, his coach is going to use extremely strong language to him to get him to not ever try to jump a guillotine on a guy when we know Conor McGregor's weakness is wrestling. Anyway, again, I'm going down the rabbit hole here. If he gets to his corner, I just need 2 minutes and 30 seconds to cash that ticket, and that's a 5-unit swing. Maybe I still have a slight losing evening, but again, it's a bump in the road as opposed to the legendary down night that I'm having instead. So just all things that can go wrong did go wrong in this situation, and I was not happy to see Conor McGregor's leg snap in half.
Man, again, I think we switched hats here because I'm usually the guy going contrarian. And in your defense, in my betting outline, I argued that if you are going to touch the fight, that it's either you feel strong on a money line and stick to that with all the variables, or you go contrarian and you go for the overs, because let's be honest, the way they stacked those betting lines, it really wasn't giving you much of a choice if you wanted to kind of get angles on that fight, right? So the fact that it ended early, and that fact that it ended early and it wasn't Conor, I got to imagine messed up a lot of people's angles, right? Because I think the round one bets were mainly Conor, not Poirier, even if you were picking Poirier, right? So I think that really, that outcome of Dustin getting it done early was really threw a wrench and was probably a winning night for the bookmakers there.
I couldn't agree more, man. I don't think there's a lot. The Dustin backers all probably thought rounds 2 and beyond as opposed to round 1. So you probably absolutely nailed it. But basically, man, rough night for me. Minus 8.25 units. The nice thing is I was up 13 on the year 2021. So even though I had a rough night, we're actually still positive for the year, if you believe it. And real quick, I catch a lot of shit for taking some of the dog shots that I take. Y'all know I'm the dog hunter. And you know what, Dan? I'm going to, real quick, I got to get in. I got to get in real close here. 1 second. I got to get everybody come in super close, super close. If you don't like the way that I bet, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to tell you guys what this degenerate is betting every single time, and I'm never going to change that. So get used to it. That's the end of the UFC 264 recap. I guess the only other thing I can say is that I, at this point, am 100,000% off the McGregor train, man. His comments, that video that came out of him like threatening death to Dustin and his wife in their sleep after the fight, too far. You know what I mean? Like, there's been a lot of questionable things. I know there's a lot of people that were talking about him just playing the heel, and that, dude, those were ravings of a madman. If your leg is broken and you're not physically able to stand, the last thing on his mind is promoting a fourth fight. The last thing on his mind is trying to get himself back where he needs to be to recapture that spotlight. He is not trying to hype up a fight. He legitimately was threatening Dustin Poirier and his wife, and that is something that I'm just done with the guy. I was honestly hopeful that he would recapture a little bit of the magic. I love Dustin Poirier. He's a great champion. He runs a charity for people. He's such a good ambassador for the sport. He's everything I've ever wanted in a championship caliber fighter. But for some reason, I really wanted to see Conor get back in the spotlight after this weekend. But seeing him deranged and screaming like that and threatening death at somebody in a very real way, that there's no excuse. Anybody who's defending him or even championing him, there's something wrong with you. Like, you need to rethink. If you think it's cool that somebody is saying that he's going to kill his wife while she sleeps, that you have crossed any and all lines, and it's completely unacceptable. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that before we move on to the next card.
Now, I'll just say I'll co-sign, there are some weird gray areas. It's an ever-evolving time. You just used a word that I've used myself on the podcast because, Clint, we grew up in the 90s, brother. And there are, we're still getting used to things. So we're not,
it's still
putting our
up
noses
here, man.
in the air. We're not putting our noses in the air. Sure. and we're not being judge and jury. We're not putting noses in the air. But I do agree there are certain things that I think are less questionable, right? And threatening lives. And more so for me, it's this whole culture of speaking as men and speaking man to man. If you have an issue with another man, especially if you're in the cage fighting business, there are plenty of ways you can legally deal with something, and properly deal with something with another man. Why do you have to go and grab and trash women when we do that? And that to me, whether it's what Conor did or even just like, we see it all the time. And since we put ourselves on a public platforms, I'm sure we're not immune to it. A lot of the venom slung out there. It's you do something like a girl or you look like a girl. It's like, bro, are you trying to insult me or women or lesbians or Brazilians or let's keep it to me. There's plenty you can make fun of. Just look at me. Right? In or out, my bets are like
fair game.
Me. I'll throw it this way all you want. That's cool, but like. It says a lot about someone's character when like that's their first go-to when they have to like trash a woman to speak to another man. That really tells you all you need to know a lot of times. Yeah.
Consensus pick here. Conor's a scumbag. Let's move on, man. Bigger and better things. UFC Vegas 31. Unfortunately, everybody, my cool little highlight here where it shows the odds and then a couple of the stats, for whatever reason, the UFC site is taking a crap. So we are not going to be able to get that here tonight. But the very first fight of the night is Alan Baudot taking on Rodrigo Nascimento Ferreira. And this is an extremely interesting fight to me because I am so confused by this line, Dan. We've got Alan Baudot, who's 8-2, Rodrigo, who's 8-1. Alan's got a 100% finish rating, and he's training with Cyril Gana. So big-time training partner, working at a good gym. Great place to be for a young up-and-coming potential fighter, right? He's got a fast jab, very unorthodox on the feet. He throws spinning back fists and elbows from all over the place. He's athletic. He throws flying knees. He likes to play with his hands low and sucker people into these wars. He's got a good get-up game, so even if you do take him down, there's no guarantee you'll keep him there. But he's got some questionable fight IQ, man. He kind of reminds me like a heavyweight version of Kevin Holland, if I'm being honest. Rodrigo, on the flip side of thing, also has a 100% finish rate, so you can expect some violence here. Neither of these guys know how to get to the judges' scorecards. And this seems to be an ATT fight week, man. almost every single fight, we've got somebody coming out of that camp, and that's where Rodrigo trains. I think that's going to be something we got to consider going into this, is that Dustin getting that big win, maybe motivating a lot of these guys. He does keep a nice high boxing guard, marches people down. He blitzes in, big clinch, power knees, and he's got some sneaky trips, man. Big body lock takedowns. He's got an extremely heavy ground game and really active ground and pound from top, some slick submissions, and that's kind of his calling card, is a big dude with lots of submissions, new heavyweight ground game style fighter. He's going to have a 1-inch reach advantage, Rodrigo Nascimento will, and I guess I'm not super high on Rodrigo. I see holes in his game, but I don't know if Allen is the guy that's going to take advantage of those opportunities. One of my fondest memories, Dan, of all time, is getting Chris Dawkins at plus 200 against Rodrigo Nascimento. That was a good day. And we're pretty similar here when it comes to the line. You've got Rodrigo Nascimento as a huge favorite again. And if I can find him, where'd you go? For some reason, I cannot see him on my screen here. There we go, plus 250. You can get Alan Badeau at plus 250 coming into this fight. And with the way the way these guys fight, man, all team violence. I mean, the under is obviously the real way to bet here. But what about that plus 250? Is that too wide? How do you feel about this matchup, Dan?
Yeah, I think the under is a good look either way. Both these guys, I think it's lined appropriately considering we don't have a decision, win or lose, on either side of this fight, folks. So, those are going to get stacked really high. And they have it, making you pretty much decide on that 1.5, which tends to do, they tend to try to make you do the bookmakers. They put the old gun to your head. And I agree with that under, especially if I'm going to pick Nascimento to tip my hand here. I wouldn't recommend playing with him, but if you were like looking at even his inside the distance lines are chalked or whatever, and I don't recommend you playing chalk here. But what I'm saying is that Badeau, all of his finishes, and he does have one, fifth round TKO in there, which is strange. But for the most part, this guy looks at how he is on paper. He's a first round finisher. So whether you're backing money line or inside the distance on Badeau and you like him, or you're staying away or on the other side, the under just feels like a nice little cushion. Not an all-out hedge. It could go over, and you're effed in that case. But I feel like that under just seems like it has to be attached to anything you consider, if you consider anything at all here.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And they've got the 1.5 set, over 1.5 even money plus 100. Under 1.5 is minus 130. That's kind of the problem, though. I mean, fight doesn't go the distance is minus 350. So, I mean, yeah, you can use that as a parlay piece if you're looking for it, because neither of these guys know how to make it 15 minutes. But I definitely would lean in a kind of a dog or pass fashion here. I used to have it's an angle I haven't gone back to in a long time, Dan. But basically, when you've got two mid to low tier heavyweights and you really have no idea what's going to happen. There's so much randomness with the way these guys fight. The big power, anybody could get caught at any point in time, and no one really has a big skill advantage. You just take the dog. There was a while there where I blindly took the dog in these situations, and it panned out pretty well. Obviously, variance caught up with me, and it started not going my way a couple of times. But I would be tempted on the dog here if I had to play this fight, but man, I'm just going to steer completely off of this one. I think there's a chance Badeau makes a ton of improvements out of the gym he's in, training with a guy like Cyril. You expect him to just get better and better and better. But Rodrigo seems like the slightly bigger man, and that takedown is going to be a problem for Allen. If he can't keep this fight standing, I do expect another submission for Nascimento. So I will say Rodrigo Nascimento wins the fight as my prediction, but I can't say there's any value on him betting-wise.
Yeah, small cage, going to favor the grappler Nascimento, purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Both guys started for fun out of the chute, 18 or 19. Badeau started it in Tokyo, which is weird. Did somebody play a mean trick on him while he was visiting? I don't know. But the point is, you made that Kevin Holland comparison, because I see him kind of throwing himself maybe sometimes out of position on certain things. And again, it could be like what was that one guy? Olenek subbed him, and the tall guy who drank and smoked cigarettes off the Ultimate Fighter. 6'7", Maurice Green. Yeah, it could be a case where you pressure forward enough while they're striking and they fall over for you, kind of a deal. So I'll go Nascimento the same.
All right. The only thing I guess I would say is just everybody be careful. This is a relatively chalky card, and I think there's going to be a lot of parlay opportunities. I don't know if you want to throw Rodrigo Nascimento in all of them thinking he's some kind of a lock, because if you do that, this one could be your early bed shit for the evening and blow your entire night's betting activity, because Alan Badeau could not get a better training partner to defend somebody who's got a heavy top game and offensive jiu-jitsu than Cyril Gane. So he's going to be more than prepared. It's just a matter of whether or not he can execute. Second fight of the night, man, we have got little Francisco Figueiredo, not Davison, not the champion, but his brother, Francisco Figueiredo, taking on Malcolm Gordon. And man, Dan, they are trying to make me put money on Malcolm Gordon this week. I'm telling you what, I looked at this fight, I did my research, I watched all my tape, and then I went and I looked at the line, and I just went, son of a bitch. Like, they are trying me. You've got Francisco Figueiredo minus 310, plus 250, the comeback on Malcolm Gordon. And I know everybody, I know at DFS, don't you start. He's trying to egg me on here. Yes, he's like, oh my God, don't do it. Exactly. No, but here's the thing. Here's the problem, right? This Figueiredo is not the God of War. It's like, what's the meme when it's like, Mom, I want God of War. And she's like, we've got the God of War at home. This is the version of the God of War that you get. He is the discount Figueiredo. He's physically strong. He does have a big left hand. I will give him that. He's got good balance. He floats well on top, but man, he moves like molasses. The athleticism and the speed of his brother do not exist in this man. He's got solid grappling, and if he can get on top of you, he can definitely be heavy. But part of the reason why I bet Jerome Rivera last week is because of how damn good he looked against Francisco Figueiredo. Francisco had to body lock and press Rivera up against the fence and then hang on for dear life their entire fight. So Malcolm is a BJJ black belt. He's a kill or be killed style fighter. He's got good forward pressure. He covers up pretty well. He understands that he's chinny. He knows that. So he kind of walks his way in like this so nobody can get to that chin. He's got a nice counter left hook. He's got good leg kicks. And he's willing to play off his back with that jiu-jitsu game. And honestly, man, he's pretty slick on the feet and on the floor. It's just like Jerome Rivera, though. That chin is the problem. He's got 4 losses by knockout. He does not react well to getting hit. He's going to have a significant speed advantage here and a 2-inch reach advantage. The thing I looked at, though, is Malcolm Gordon, the guys he fought so far in the UFC, Sumajiri and Amir Albazi. 2 legit up-and-coming prospects who are miles ahead of Francisco Figueiredo. Dan, talk me off a ledge, dude. This is dog or pass, and the degenerate in me is seeing this plus 250 and going, the only thing is the chin. The only thing keeping me off Malcolm Gordon right now is that damn chin. Talk to me, Dan.
Yeah, this is, you're right. I think you said bed shedders. For me, I have got about 5 fighters here that, for me, it's the usual suspects lineup. That's my analogy in my head, and they all have to say the line. And I'm not really convinced with a lot of these guys. Spoiler alert, right? So I don't blame your thought process here. However, I will say it's strange because it's like he doesn't do well against southpaws. You look at how he did against Sumajiri, but Sumajiri, like you said, a very fast up-and-coming prospect, and even just on the speed scale, like as far as southpaw crosses go, like both him and Big Fig, Francisco Figueiredo, are probably on the opposite side in that division, right? Francisco Figueiredo, not very fast. However, he does have that, that gamesmanship that a lot of these fighters like Davison and a lot of these, vets do, that, when they're getting a little tired, you try to outpace them with that speed you're talking about that Gordon has. And, maybe they'll take an eye poke or it's a knee and it didn't really hit clean, but they'll signal to the ref and they'll get their time back. And Francisco Figueiredo definitely has that playbook down, So I'm actually going to pick him here. These are 2 black belts, but it's tricky because Francisco Figueiredo, he's the guy that I suspect to be on top, and that should win it for him. However, not just a black belt for Gordon. He's a guy that gets his finishes from bottom, arm bars, triangles, Kimuras. So he's going to be playing right into his wheelhouse. So I think he's going to try to scare him off with the 2. hopefully, maybe give him some PTSD flashbacks of Sumaderji and go to positional grappling toward the end of rounds. And I think it's just going to be a real, kind of a Weasley, shout out to Shaq from Half the Battle. I know that's his word there. Weasley kind of a decision here where not just the line, but I think even the performance. Malcolm Gordon's probably going to be giving you all the hope in the world, and I wish him the best, especially if he has Bazooka Joe Valtellini in his corner. But I'm gonna go with Francisco Figueiredo for a real greasy decision here.
Okay. I get it, man. I absolutely get it. And like I said, if you told me they screwed in a metal plate in Malcolm Gordon's chin, I'd be betting him this weekend. Like that's the only thing keeping me off this guy right now. I may find myself with a degenerate sprinkle on Malcolm Gordon by submission come fight time, just for a little bit of something, because as a plus 250 underdog, that line's going to be pretty stupid to take him inside the distance. And I think that's kind of his best path to victory here. You don't knock out a Figueiredo. You just don't. So if he's ever going to get anything, it's going to be the club and sub, or snatching him, like you said, from his back with one of those arm bars or something along those lines. So might have to take a flyer there. And Uncle Weezy hitting me with the 1-800-GAMBLER. couldn't be more right, my man. Could not be more
Abby.
Right.
Great Abby.
Locker room in the house. What's up, buddy? How you doing? All right. So next fight up, folks. We've got Miles Johns taking on Anderson Dos Santos. And we're just going to keep the shady fights rolling on this card, Dan. I got to tell you, man, every single fight on this preliminary card is just yikes. I mean, from a betting perspective, this card is so dangerous. Everybody be extremely cautious with the amount of money you put on any of these fighters here. Miles Johns, 11-1 Fortis MMA fighter, big-time offensive grappler. He's a little tank of a man. He likes to grind people up against the fence. He's got heavy hands. He's got a good jab. He's explosive, well-timed level changes, but he really relies on that wrestling. He uses the wrestling to set up basically everything else that he does. Anderson Dos Santos, 21-8, extremely aggressive. This guy, holy crap, like he stays right in his opponent's face constantly throughout the fight. He keeps his hands low. He's extremely hittable, willing to brawl, but he does have a strong body lock, man. He's got slick BJJ, and he finds his opponent's backs a lot, I've noticed. He's got a smothering, strong top game, so if he is in any way able to combat the wrestling or reverse a position or something, Miles Johns could end up in some trouble on the ground. The only issue for Anderson Dos Santos is that 66% takedown defense rating. I do not like that. He is going to have a 4-inch reach advantage here in this spot. Is there an argument to be made for the plus 145 underdog in this spot? Or once again, do you like the chalk, the minus 175 favorite?
I'm a big fan of, rolling the dice on the guy like Anderson Dos Santos. The kind of guy, like if you're ahead of the night, and even if you didn't pick him, maybe you try to take him to outwork an Andre Ewell, which he tried his best to do. And to his defense, his chin held up there and has held up toward the latter end of his career. I know Victor Henry got the cut stoppage, and the next one you got to go back all the way to 2015 Jungle Fights to Justin Aldo Silva. Boy, those two names together, that must have been like a whole Reebok fight kit jumble machine. But he is a guy that, as you say, will fight for your money if you are going to back him. I'm not hard and concrete on something on this fight. It is interesting, though, because obviously Anderson Dos Santos, not as deadly, not as good with it, both with the submissions, oddly enough, but also obviously with the striking, where like a Pedro Munoz style, okay, if I can't get good wrestling, I'm not big for the division, let me just pressure the crap out of you. So you either shoot, or I'm going to, stack up volume, and maybe even crack you and then submit you like you did to Ricky Simon, right? So, he definitely has that in him. And it's going to be similar, I think, to the Andre Ewell fight. Offhand, but here's the difference, though, is that Miles John actually, he's a 5-time something state wrestler. He's accomplished a lot as far as not amateur wrestling as far as in college, but he grew up wrestling, right? And I believe he trains out of Fortis. I know that they've kind of worked with his pace management. His speed is there. He's got a nice jab when he wants to get behind it. But how much more will he fade if he's forced to wrestle, and will he want to wrestle? So there's some things I'm going to be looking in here, but this is a fight where even if I end up picking Miles here, this really does feel like a dog or pass. I want to be careful about putting money. I think you had a great warning. No matter what your side, be careful going too heavy. But yeah, I mean, part of me am real tempted to look at this dog here in Dos Santos, but we'll see.
I don't hate it, man. He always brings the fight. He always comes into play. And I kind of thought that maybe I would lean towards the dog side as well. But the way that we've seen Miles John's striking start to come along, especially coming off that knockout of the year contender over Kevin Natividad, where he put him in a full-on backflip. I don't necessarily want to step in front of a guy that looks like he's improving every single time out. So it's funny that we're going to end up going head-to-head a little bit here, because this would be a favorite or pass spot for me. I'm not personally going to be betting it. It feels a lot like Carlos Condit last week, where I think that the dog is going to fight pretty well, but at the end of the day, I think Miles Johns gets his hand raised.
Yeah, I was just looking at that round 3 too, and that was a round where I thought he could be weakened. So you're right. That's a definite sign for an improvement. That's a sign of trajectory going upwards. And you're right. It's real dangerous to put your money, ahead of that kind of a trajectory. I was trying to find out where Anderson Dos Santos was training here. I'm not too familiar with his team. I'm curious if he made that American top team trek, as many of these fighters on this card and a lot of the Brazilians tend to do. But yeah, I'm probably leaning toward the favorite as well, and we'll see where I end up on that. But you brought up great points.
You as well, man. And as always, hey, if we end up on opposite sides of the pick for the people in the chat, just know it's all love and respect here on the show. So no sweat if we disagree on a pick or something like that. That's what the betting game is all about, right? Real quick, man, before we go on to the next fight, I want to shout out one of my sponsors, Goat Capital Sport, over on Twitter. I do my very best in MMA, everybody, and like I said, I am not a professional handicapper. I'm a degenerate sports bettor. These guys actually do the dang thing day in and day out. They do baseball, basketball, soccer. They're killing it with golf picks every single week. Check out goatcapitalsports.com. Very reasonable prices, and they have a money-back guarantee. If they have a losing week when you purchase their picks, they will refund you the price of purchase for that week. So you really get the picks and get out of Dodge for free with that refund opportunity. So they're really good guys. Check them out at GOATCapital _. Let them know I sent you. They will be super excited for you to sign up and start winning with GOAT. All right, moving along. We've got a fight that I'm a little surprised by, Dan. I'm pretty surprised by this one. Khalid Taha taking on Sergey Morozov. We've got Khalid, who is 13-3. Morozov is 16-4. And Khalid's last fight absolutely floored me. He went to war with maybe the scariest man in the division, in my opinion, at least until he lost his last fight. I was extremely high on Hani Barcelos. And the performance that Khalid Taha put in against Barcelos really impressed me. The fact that he stayed conscious, he was in every exchange, he took everything that Barcelos had to offer. I thought that a lesser man would have been knocked out multiple times throughout that fight. So Khalid Taha is a guy that after that fight, I basically said, look, I'm probably going to bet this guy his next fight. I almost don't care who his opponent is after that kind of a performance. And then I dug into the tape on my guy, Sergey Morozov. There are not a ton of live dogs on this card, but I really feel like Sergey Morozov may be one of the few that is available. And I'm sitting tight on this one. We've got 225 live viewers right now, man. First off, thank you to each and every one of you for spending your Monday here with us. But if you're going to rock with me, I'm not entirely sure I'm pulling this trigger to begin with, but wait, because all the money is coming in right now on Taha. That line is getting wider, and I'm very tempted to see how high Morozov gets before I make my move there. He's so freaking slick. He made his UFC debut against Umar Nurmagomedov. And, I mean, talk about a freaking uphill battle. Your first UFC fight is a guy named Nurmagomedov. It doesn't get worse than that, man. He's training out of ATT. So he's right where he needs to be, in my opinion, for this fight card. He's got a strong lead hand, a great counter check hook. He's got the right hand from hell. Sergey loads up on his right hand like nothing you've ever seen and flatlines people with that thing. He strikes well moving backwards. He's slick in scrambles, and he's got excellent takedown defense. Now, people are going to look at his numbers. His stats are going to show 54% takedown defense. But remember, he's only had one fight. That's only from the Umar Nurmagomedov fight. So we can't exactly take that stat and run with it, right? Khalid Taha, I don't want to cut this guy short in any way. He's got a big right hand, but he wings power hooks. He's got good head movement. He kind of feints his way into boxing range, and then he just unloads on power shots. He does everything with power. I think this is a spot where Sergey Morozov can just kind of play the matador, stay at range, jab him up, use his footwork, keep the fight standing, and if he wants to, load up on that right hand. I'm kind of feeling Morozov, and I'm kind of feeling Morozov by decision or the over. Dan, how do you feel about this fight?
I definitely think this one's going to decision. I admittedly haven't dug too much into this one, so I'm going to reserve my right here to change my pick in case I do. But I am leaning toward the favorite in Taha. It's not a confident one because when you look back at that fight with Morozov, I want to say he fought on short notice, but they actually originally were scheduled that fight with Umar back in October of 2020, and they rescheduled it. So he actually kind of had even longer to prepare, but he didn't really fight like that. Do you chalk that up to the jitters of the debut? He doesn't come from a wrestling background, sure, but he's got a master in sports and pancration, and he actually comes from soccer. Sergey Morozov didn't start fighting mixed martial arts till about 19. He actually played soccer, and I guess he got to a point where I don't think it was an injury, probably just didn't think he was going to make pros at that point going into college or whatever. Switches over to MMA, pancration, which is a striking form. You can do kicks like open-handed strikes. I don't know how it's regulated where he came up, and I believe is not even Russian. Like, is he a Kazakhstan fighter? I believe, but I'm not sure those exact rules how it's being ran today. I'm more going off like the Bossroot and Frank Shamrock days. But there's a lot of submission grappling in there, right? But when he has been submitted, at least it's been by good guys like Evla back at M1, and I plan to go back and look at his M1 footage.
No shame in that.
So I mean they're quality losses. So it's really deceptive. Whereas Taha, I was a bit biased with southpaw boxer, Hawaiian from Extreme Couture and Boston Salmon, but then he lays Boston out, and I'm like, wow, this guy's got power. I thought he was just a Taekwondo brown belt or whatever that he lists, and he actually has some German wrestling credentials. So I think that leans into your read where again, he's not as good of a wrestler as the guys that were able to best Morozov. I think that's the key to his submission losses there. I don't think Taha's at that level, but I do think he's good enough to have this maybe be a prolonged striking war, like you were saying. And there we're going to get more into the techniques of if he can play the matador, because that's what you got to do against a power puncher that's stout and athletic, and with those heavy hands from both sides like Taha has. So I don't hate your read there, and I'm going to be curious where I myself end up on this fight.
And one thing to go to your point of this going to be a big banging type of stand-up fight, man. He's got one KO loss, does Morozov, and it came against Josh Reddinghouse back in 2016. I will have everybody know that this man rematched Josh Reddinghouse in October of 2019, just before getting his entry to the UFC. He avenged that loss and won via decision. So he fought a big power puncher that clocked him before, a championship caliber fighter, took him a full 25 minutes, won a decision over that man, showing me the improvements of the caliber that I'm going to be looking for here. Like, he knows how to avoid that big power shot now more so than he used to when he was just a kid. And as much as I don't want to disrespect Khalid Taha, he hasn't fought the best UFC caliber competition, and he's a 50-50 fighter at this stage in the UFC. He was basically a walking punching bag against Hani Barcelos. He did out-grapple Bruno Silva, but he had like 2 feet and about 40 pounds on Bruno Silva. He's just an absolute tank compared to that guy. And then his only other opponents were Boston Salmon, who he KO'd in 25 seconds, and Nad Niramani. So he got outpowered by Nad Niramani. Okay, fair enough. And then he knocked out a guy who went 0-2 back-to-back knockout losses in the UFC. We still have questions about Boston Salmon, whether or not he'll work his way back to the big show or not. So big questions on the opponent for Khalid Taha here and where he should actually sit in the pecking order in the UFC, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything you said there.
Good stuff, man. All right, we found our first, my first real dogger pass spot on the card. That one's one that I'm going to keep my eye very closely on. If it looks like the market is trending the other direction, I may just have to jump and go ahead and lock that one in, because I'm seeing +140, I'm seeing +145 out there. It's all the way down to +135 in some places. And I like to use bestfightodds.com. They are not a sponsor of the show. They just do good shit, so I shout them out. That's where I watch the market moves. And if you see all those down arrows ticking across on the dog, now's the time to jump because it looks like the market made their move. So I'll be watching that closely throughout the week. Next fight up, man, we've got Amanda Lemos taking on Montserrat Ruiz. And if you all recognize that name, Montserrat Ruiz, but you cannot quite place it, she's the chick that wears the bunny ears. she's all tatted up. She's got the sick neck tattoo, and then she throws those bunny ears on for her pictures and the weigh-ins and the face-offs, and she likes to have fun with it. I like Montserrat Ruiz. So Lemos is 9-1-1. Ruiz is 10-1. And let's just start with Amanda Lemos, man. She is huge. She made her UFC debut at 135 and has worked her way down to 115. And I know that she is not the female Figueiredo because that's my girl who's actually in Figueiredo's camp, but she feels like a Figueiredo-esque fighter, right? Like she should not be in this weight class. She is massive, and I don't know how she gets down here, but she's got big power because she somehow manages to get her body down to 115 for weigh-ins. She walks her opponents down. She has fast hands. She's got a sick killer instinct. If you get rocked or hurt at all, Lemos is going to dive all over you and pound you out. She's got nasty front chokes, a slick set of footwork and hands. I really like everything that I see from Amanda Lemos, and in my opinion, she is a parlay piece, and I have parlayed her this week. Montserrat Ruiz, she's going to be at a 4-inch reach disadvantage, and she walks her opponents down, man. She walks straight. She blocks her opponent's punches with her face. Like, this is her style, is she just walks straight forward, dead ahead, and if she can take what you're given, she will try to push you up against the cage and then work herself into a grappling situation where, very confusingly, she uses the head and arm. She's always looking for the headlock and ends up in this really weird laying down on her side position where she's up high on the body, and it really shouldn't work. But somehow she's made it work for herself. Man, I completely agree with Amanda Lemos being a big favorite here in this spot, simply because I don't think Ruiz is physically strong enough to contend with her the way that she has with other fighters. The fact that she has no striking defense and walks into her opponents, I feel like that's going to be just setting up Lemos for a big power shot. And man, I mean, maybe she'll prove me wrong, but I don't think you can walk through Amanda Lemos's power. I just think that's a terrible game plan. And that headlock position, like I talked about, Lemos is incredibly underrated in the ground. If you put her in that headlock position, she's going to take your back. And then you're in the bad position rather than her. I can't say enough nice things about Lemos, and I think this is a horrific matchup for Montserrat Ruiz. So, like I said, I've already parlayed her. I've got her in my big parlay bet for the week. How are you feeling about this fight, and are we in agreement on this one?
Yeah, I think I can't disagree with what you're saying. I feel like essentially now, unless you got in early, props to you. I think that's a parlay piece. But now where the line is moved, I feel like now we're just for the breakdown of this fight, I think we're paying for the IQ test, right? Which is the head and arm and scarf hold IQ test. Montserrat obviously has wrestling, but I wonder if you get maybe a little bit of luta libre south of the border background, because she's got a lot of very catch style submissions, like what Barnett got with Lister, which is that scarf hold. You can transition to kind of like a poor man's Americana by hooking it into your leg. If they snatch their arm away from that, they're in head and arm choke territory. So there are some things to work, but it's very dangerous because you can get your back taken. And if it was a more experienced fighter than Cheyenne, and I say that with respect, I've trained with Cheyenne before when she was at Extreme Couture, but maybe a more experienced fighter would have been able to take advantage of that. But I'll be curious. Lemos, she doesn't have any ranks in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but you're absolutely right. She does work with the Marajo brothers, which is the kind of the grappling team of what do you call Figueiredo, as well as Yuri Alcantara, who is, again, that's one of the few Jiu-Jitsu teams that actually will work with leg locks and stuff like that. So she's seen some really obscure submissions. That's a really, really good submission and grappling team to come from. So it's probably no coincidence that Amanda Lemos, who has fought stronger competition, has not been submitted. It is strange, though, because as she's gotten refined, and I got to go back to watch footage, I'm going strictly off memory for this one right now. But I feel like she counterpunches well in combination, but countering in general could be dangerous because that means you're letting Monstrat get to clinch range. So again, this essentially is going to come down to an IQ test. Maybe, if I'm not correct, the over -155, if you're getting desperate to look for some kind of legs to latch onto and you don't feel comfortable leaning the chalk, perhaps, because even though Amanda Lemos has the finishing ability, again, this is going to be more of an IQ test. Even if she can hang on the ground, why choose that? Make her come to you and keep counter-striking, keep outpointing her. I think that's what we see Lemos do here.
Okay. I like the take, man. I would be more leaning towards a potential submission win myself, because I do think Montserrat Ruiz has that Mexican warrior, that chin that just never seems to fail those amazing people. And I think that if anyone's going to crack her, it would be somebody like Lemos. But with what we've seen from that pop, that power, and especially like going back to what I was talking about, Figueiredo and Moreno, the club and sub is there. You know what I mean? When you get these highly durable fighters that just never seem to go away, the club and sub is always there, especially if she's pushing that takedown game, that she's going to be able to jump the gilly Lemos will. So I think I might take a little sprinkle on that sub prop. But like I said, the safest route for me, got her in a parlay. I got to go with the favorite here.
Nice. Lock it up early while you can, right? Get it.
Yep. Exactly. And Dan, I want to ask you a question real quick, because the next fight is the final fight on the preliminary card. But I have heard from a little bird that we may be adding Ode Osborne versus Amir Albazi to this week's card. Do you know, is that accurate information?
I've seen lines on it. So yeah, that sounds like a late addition. I have not seen a confirmation, but I haven't been on the Twitter timeline since about a half hour before we went live. So okay. That's all it takes. We could have confirmation by now, maybe not. That's
true. So real quick, I just want to briefly touch on it. It was the last fight that I heard may have been added, so I didn't do my full deep dive because it may be next week or 2 weeks from now, whatever. But I want to give anybody the info that they might want to get from the show. Make sure we don't miss a fight completely. Ode Osborne, long, athletic, explosive power, underrated grappling. This kid's a finisher. I absolutely love everything I've seen from Ode Osborne. I'm a fan, and he's coming off that 26-second knockout over Rivera. A lot of people on this card apparently have come off a win over Rivera. He's fought a low level of UFC competition so far. He's going to have a 5-inch reach advantage here over Albazi. Albazi's incredibly aggressive, fast hands, slick grappling. He won his last fight against Malcolm Gordon, actually, via triangle. So everyone knocks that guy out. You would expect Amir Albazi to be just one more to find that chin, but actually showed off a slick bottom game, locked up a triangle, and choked him out. Man, this is another all-team violence bet, in my opinion. I don't know that I'd want to side on this particular fight. You've got Amir Albazi minus 250, plus 200, I think, on the other side here with Ode Osborne. It would feel kind of like a dog or pass spot for me, but I'm also, I think, higher on Ode Osborne than a lot of people might be, and definitely a spot where you would expect one of these guys to go down. They both finish. They both get finished. I'd be leaning under. How do you feel about that one if you have any type of a feel on it this early?
Completely agree. I think I don't hate that Albazi's the favorite, but off my memory, off both of those, offhand, I don't think he should be that big of a favorite. Like you said, you could make an argument both guys have actually shown opportunistic finishes off on the bottom, so you can't even say that that's a sure shot if somebody's able to dictate position. So I don't hate that as far as violence, especially a last-minute addition. It's a little bit disorientation, kind of like fighters taking a fight on last minute. And for what it's worth, this doesn't necessarily mean anything. I got the UFC bio sheets emailed me right before the show, and neither Albazi or Ode Osborne are on there. But that doesn't necessarily mean anything. But for what it's worth, the UFC didn't include them in the bio sheets that went out.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I didn't spend a ton of time on it or spend a ton of time researching it.
There you go.
We'll see where that fight ends up, but it's a good fight nonetheless. No matter where it falls, I do want to see it. So the next one that we know we have to talk about is closing out the preliminary show. Daniel Rodriguez taking on UFC newcomer and short notice fill-in Preston Parsons. Now, Daniel Rodriguez is 14-2. Preston is 9-2. And Rodriguez is one of those guys that I have a bit of a rocky relationship, man. I've been pretty much on the wrong side of Rodriguez every single time this guy fights. If I think he's going to flop, that's when he shows up and looks like a beast. When I buy into the hype and I'm talking about how fast his hands are, that's when he shows up and he looks a little sleepy and doesn't quite know what he's doing in the cage there. So I cannot seem to figure this guy out. He's got sharp hands, good footwork, really good range control, and really slick boxing. He's got a 78% takedown defense rating, which I like. And then he's taken on Parsons, who, like I said, short notice replacement. All 9 of his wins are by submission. This kid really relies on the grappling. He's got a strong body lock. He's got good knees in the clinch. And you know what? He does work a high pace. He's one of these guys that kind of breaks his opponents down as the fight goes on. Really works well in the clinch, good uppercuts, good knees, and is just constantly on you and in your face. I will give it to him that he's got a pretty solid 1-2 as well, which I know absolute basic level striking, but hey, we wouldn't be here without the basics. So I don't know what to do with this one, man. This is one of those classic spots where the short notice kid could absolutely just ruin everybody's night. It's minus 215 Rodriguez, plus 170 Preston Parsons. And honestly, I'm not touching this one. I am nowhere near this fight because the paper says that the battle-tested UFC caliber Daniel Rodriguez, who had a full fight, who had a full camp, he should be able to just walk straight through this newcomer kid. But from what I've seen with Parsons, he can just eat what you throw his way and keep coming. And if he does that to someone like Daniel Rodriguez and manages to get him against the fence or manages to get him down, Daniel Rodriguez could be in trouble. I would like to lean on that 78% takedown defense, and I am going to pick Daniel Rodriguez to win this fight, but I just don't know how confident I can be in him, mostly because of my own shortcomings and not being able to figure out this guy and when exactly he's going to win and when he's not going to show up. So maybe more scared of myself than anything here, but I'll say D-Rod wins. Do you have anything on this fight, Dan?
Dang it, Clint. I hate how convincing you are, man, because like I try not to listen to others in the space, especially at least before I put out my own content, but it is a fun dessert, if you will. And if I do go back to listen, I'll be like, you know who's really convincing? Clint, man. Clint on Die Hard MMA. He makes some really great arguments, even when I'm not even on the same side as you, man. Yeah, so you're kind of scaring me there because I feel like I've got a pretty good beat on D-Rod. I thought I got scared, but when I went to rewatch that Dalby fight, I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. Dalby still hasn't fought any southpaws, and I made up for that with the southpaw fault line that is Nicholas Dalby. However, you do bring up some great points. We are in the small cage. D-Rod does do some underrated things as far as takedown defense goes. He doesn't seem worried there for a reason. I don't know how much he's advancing there. He's still rocking that same purple belt under 10th planet that was on his profile that the UFC emails out here that I've seen since his debut. Whereas Parsons, I actually trained with Preston Parsons back at Alliance MMA when the kid was only 18. And it was in the lead up to his fight with Mike Perry. And although that knee that Mike Perry landed would have knocked anybody out, and is part of the reason why I always preached a very underrated part of Mike Perry's game is the knees, is because of Preston Parsons. But I'm not saying this is why, but this kid this is giving him credit. And I don't like to tell stories out of school, but screw it, this is fine. He went to war with Jeremy Stevens, man. And Jeremy Stevens is a cat that goes, I mean, it's no surprise. It would have been minus 1,000. Does Jeremy Stevens spar hard in the gym? Minus 1,000.
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah, he spars hard in the gym, folks. And they just took brain cells off each other, right? We'll get to Jeremy Stevens later. And the kid is tough. He had a really good team around him. Maybe it's the same team because it looks like he's still working out of Florida. He did a trip to train under the same grappling coach that I was under at the time with Neil Melanson there. So yeah, the kid had it even back then. Maybe he grew a little bit. I thought he was more my height at like 5'9". He says he's listed as 5'11". He's fought at lightweight primarily throughout his career. There's a size difference, but lest we not forget, D-Rod also used to fight at lightweight too. He's not a small guy by any means, a small welterweight, but he's not the biggest welterweight either, D-Rod. So perhaps there's some size there. Can he, is this one of those stylistic ones where it was like Burns and Thompson? He just, he didn't have a good enough guy dedicated to him for some time, and this could be the kryptonite. I'm going to look into it further, but D-Rod is amongst the usual suspects I cited earlier as far as potential parlay pieces I'm looking at, despite all the love, and I'm happy to see Preston Parsons make it to the UFC. But we'll see. We'll see if he passes the usual suspect test. But obviously, the lean in the pick here is D-Rod.
Okay. Sounds like a plan, man. I'm struggling with this card, man, and it's funny because a lot of people may point to the fact that I'm coming off of a pretty rough losing night that I would be a little hesitant the next fight to pull triggers. And that's not the reason that I'm not feeling it today. That's not the reason that I'm not confident in these plays. It's because these are sketchy as shit spots, man. Like, I can't feel confident. I would love to stick my flag in the ground and say, this is the side that I'm on. And so far, there's only been 2 fights on the entire card that I've been able to do that. And that's because of how close these fights are, man. Like I said, I'm going to pick D-Rod. I expect D-Rod to get the win. But what I've seen on tape from Preston Parsons, this kid's legit. He's not a scrub. He's not going to come in here and just fall over. So now watch, he's going to slip on a banana peel and get knocked out in like 30 seconds or something right after I say that. People will loop that for me. No, but I'm serious. I think Preston Parsons is actually a decent fighter, and I would love to see him get like a full camp type opportunity in the UFC. So I hope he has a good showing. I hope it's a good fight, and just going to stay off it from a betting perspective. I will wish all of you luck betting on D-Rod. D-Rod by submission, I think, is what my boy Mills said. Mills always does interviews with these fighters. He's got some good fighter relationships going. Make sure you check Mills out on Pub Sports Radio. And I always love doing that, man. If a UFC fighter calls their shot, I don't have any problem sprinkling that path to victory. You know, D-Rod by sub is probably going to be a decent number.
Don't disagree.
Yeah, let's go. All right. We're headed to the main card, man. We're headed over to the good stuff. This is where things get a little bit more interesting, in my opinion. First fight on the main card is Gabriel Mowgli Benitez taking on Billy Q, a featherweight fight. Gabriel is 22-9. Billy Q is 15-3. And Gabriel Benitez is a guy that has been interesting, I guess we'll say, in his UFC career so far. We all know about the hardest kicker in the gym story. I mean, that's something that as soon as the broadcast gets going, you're gonna hear them go ahead and drop that little tidbit that he's the hardest kicker in the gym. We know he's got filthy leg kicks. He switches it up and goes to the body every once in a while, and he is slick on the feet, man. But the problem is he's extremely hittable, and he struggles with pressure. If you get in the face of Gabriel Benitez, he has a really hard time striking moving backwards because he can't access those kicks the way that he would like to. He does have a long jab, and he may be riding a little high. He just snapped the 2-fight losing streak with a win over Justin James. But if there's ever a win in the UFC that you could be a little suspicious about, would it not be my man Justin James in the wrong weight class? So he's
short
coming off
too.
of a win. Short notice. I mean, come on, that's classic Justin James, though. Up a weight class, short notice. That's all the guy does. So, yeah, man, I can't really say that I'm overly impressed with Gabriel Benitez going to war with a guy that's on short notice in the wrong weight class, and a guy that just wants to bang it out in round 1. He came out on top in that situation. Okay, sure. I'm not at all surprised by that. He's taken on Billy Q, who is one of these fighters that uses his gas tank like a weapon, man. Billy Q puts on an insane pace when he gets out there. He mixes in the grappling. He's always threatening with that takedown. And this is something I haven't talked about on the podcast for a while, but the threat of the takedown. We see the threat of the takedown really screw with fighters like Gabriel Benitez, because when Billy gets in on the hips one time, whether or not he gets that takedown, he has to think about it the entire rest of the fight. I thought this was going to be a kickboxing match. Oh, shit, man. This guy might grab my leg. Okay, now I got to think about that. And he does that really, really well. He mixes it in regularly to make sure that he keeps it on his opponents, basically in every way possible. He will be in your face from start to finish for this fight. I think Billy Q is the best dog on the card, man. I've got 2 units on him at plus 180. I've already locked in hard on this kid because he's coming off of a bit of a layoff. He took a rest, which the way this kid fights, the high pace, he does take some damage. I think that him healing up and getting a bit of a break was the way to go for him. And then the fact that he constantly gets in the face of these fighters. Gabriel Benitez is a guy that we have seen slow down late. We've seen him gas out later in fights. He's not a guy that's unbreakable. He's been submitted twice. He's been knocked out twice. He's lost 4 decisions. He's not a world beater. He's not the guy I feel like they're maybe pretending that he is. There's certain guys that they are amazing in the gym, and it just doesn't always translate to being under the bright lights, and I kind of feel like that's Mowgli. Like, I feel like maybe he's a gym fighter and not a bright lights fighter. Billy Q, on the other hand, is a bright lights fighter. He might have just gotten beat by Gavin Tucker, but as we all know, Gavin Tucker is a wild man. If he didn't just get taken out by Dan Ige, we'd be talking about Gavin Tucker for a title shot pretty quick. So I like Gabriel Benitez, but I think Billy Q is a very bad matchup for him. I think he rights the ship after this little break that he's gone on here, that one loss, and I like him. I think he's a very, very live dog here. Dan, what do you got for me on this one?
Man, I'm I got love for Billy Q, Billy Quarantine. And how does Billy Quarantine do now that the quarantines are over? Does he get stronger? Does he get weaker? I don't know. No, I'm a big fan of Billy Quarantillo, and I'm a big fan of his style. And he is also, seems to be a fan of the betting on fights. So I do got to wonder how much of the strategy is at play, because he knows what his strengths are. And when he has guys like the Spike Carlisles of the world, where there's a suspicious gas tank there, he knows that that's what he needs to press. And I like that. I know a fighter that knows his win conditions, right? How many times we bet on fighters, we pull our hair out because it's like, why aren't you doing what's going to lead you to the win? Phil Davis, you're a great wrestler. Why are you fighting off your back foot? It's important for fighters to know their win conditions. Even veterans, the one I just mentioned, all due respect, they don't necessarily fight to it. Billy Q does. And for all the reasons of pressure, I get it. I agree. And I like it in the small cage. I just got to go back and rewatch that Gavin Tucker fight, because here's the thing. I'm not underrating Benitez here. And even when I did, I always admit my bias, when I take my bias shots on cowboys like Janes or something. Here's the thing is, I don't disrespect Benitez. He's one of my favorite, if not my favorite, tough Latam fighter. I'm a big fan of southpaw strikers. And that's the worry here, because not only is Gavin Tucker a southpaw, Spike Carlisle, they didn't really grapple that fight, and Spike Carlisle also goes from, or they didn't really strike that fight. They mainly grappled, and Carlisle goes from both stances, what I've noticed. So I don't know if I want to credit him for a southpaw win, but his losses have come to southpaws. And I'm even talking about UFC, not vet, but he fought in the UFC, Michel Quinones, who is a more karate stylist. He fights from orthodox, but if you look at that finish, the one stoppage loss of Billy Q, he actually throws it from a southpaw stance, that head kick. That's what knocks him clean out. So that's kind of a worry there. And it's not just the kicks. Also, I want to shout Benitez's boxing and his uppercut, especially on a level-changing Billy Q. That could be a good shot to watch out for, lest we not forget, even though he lost to Youssef, he also rocked Youssef. Benitez has some excellent boxing. I think that's the one improvement he's done. But we haven't seen enough improvements in the grappling. I think he insulates himself with the guillotine and some decent takedown defense against the cage that could serve him well. But I still think that Billy Q can get to the body lock, shuck by, get to his back. And this could be more of one of those Stephen Thompson, Gilbert Burns facts where, Benitez himself has been quietly in the UFC for a while, but we haven't seen him pressed with much grapplers. And even though he does well against shorter fighters, which is most of his wins come against shorter fighters, by the way, he tends to lose against taller fighters, which Billy Q is, even when those shorter fighters want to go for takedowns. Like Barzola, they were able to get those. So I'm not sold on it. And he doesn't even have the inflated stats that only take the UFC sample. I think he's only 56% or something. I know the UFC is not up, but you guys can go to UFCstats.com, which I think is like the old fight metric, and you can get those UFC samples. And he doesn't even have a great percentage there. So I'm circling the drain, getting ready to fire. I just have to do my due diligence and watch a couple more fights, but I'm completely with you, Clint.
Okay. I like to hear that, man. And yeah, takedown defense 56% per UFC.
Oh, I was right. Look at that. I pulled that out.
Nailed it, man. On it. This man knows his stuff. So I think this is a buy low spot, man. Everybody's kind of counting Billy Q out after his loss to Gavin Tucker, and then seeing Gavin Tucker lose the way he did immediately after that. It's that domino effect. He lost to that guy who lost to that guy who just got wrecked. He must suck. Like that's kind of the ever ending triangle that we have of recency bias in the UFC. Gabriel Benitez coming off of a massive knockout win. Everybody's high on this kid. Forget about the last two losses. Nobody cares. He's winning. I know what you're talking about with the hands in the Sadiq Youssef fight, but Youssef is a guy that, if we can just tangent for ever such a small portion here real quick, he gets rocked every fight. Like Sadiq is a guy that I'm just waiting for, like, the time that he fights a crisp, clean power boxer. I think we fade Sadiq Youssef. I'm on the Sadiq train until he fights a guy like Calvin Kattar, because that's going to be the guy that'll get him and get him in a big way. So just, I can't quite give all the credit to Gabriel Benitez for rocking him, because I've seen it happen before with other people. And I want to mention the wins of Gabriel Benitez. A lot of people, especially people in the chat, they're talking about how statistically excellent he is, how good his numbers are. So his wins in the UFC are Sam Sicilia, Jason Knight, Humberto Bandone, and Justin James. Do you know any of those names, or are any of those names even with the organization anymore? Gabriel Benitez is a can crusher, in my opinion. He kind of reminds me of almost a Sean Strickland, is that he's amazing in the gym. People rave about him. And then as soon as he gets under the bright lights, if he's fighting anyone that's potentially going to be a top-tier opponent, he can't handle it. And that's kind of what I'm feeling in this type of situation. I think Billy Q can stay in his face, make him break, make him gas, have him slow down. And then I think Billy Q's grappling, like you mentioned, is a big deal, man. If he can backpack him for any part of this fight, that's just going to drain that gas tank any extra little bit more. I will take it. I'll be on Billy Q here. I'm already on Billy Q here. And I may, as always, be looking for that little round 3 sprinkle.
Nice. I don't hate that at all.
Hey, when fighters gas, man, that's my spot. If a fighter is known to slow down the later the fight goes, that's where I strike for that round 3 spot. And Billy Q, that kid doesn't slow down. He's got a history of finishing in that 3rd round too. Dana White's Contender Series, round 3 KO, 2nd round submission over Jacob Kilburn. Kyle Nelson, round 3 knockout, another guy that tends to slow down if he doesn't get it done early. Submission triangle choke all the way back in 2014 at the SOFC. So, I mean, he's got a history of catching people after they get a little bit tired. So I think this is a spot where I'll definitely be going back to the well with my degenerate sprinkle.
Yeah, sounds good. I like that. I like that round 3.
All right, man. Moving along. I'm glad you agree with me on that one. All right. It's time, folks. Let's get hot. This is going to be a good one. Rodolfo Vieira taking on Dustin Stoltzfus. Rodolfo Vieira burned a lot of people the last time out, Dan. I'm proud to say I was one of the few who took the shot on my guy Fluffy Hernandez. And not only did he pull the upset and ruin everybody's night, but he choked the black belt hunter out, which is something you simply do not do. So everybody this week is piling on Dustin Stoltzfus, and closing my big parlay of the week with Amanda Lemos is none other than Rodolfo Vieira, folks. I am on Rodolfo. I have parlayed Rodolfo, and he is the guy that I'm planting my flag on here. So let me tell you why. Like I said, I was one of the few who actually banked on the gas tank of my guy Fluffy Hernandez the last fight out. And I actually got into a big Twitter war with somebody about this one just the other day. So if you know who you are, shout out to you in the chat. It's always fun to go back and forth. But what happens in this fight is everyone's looking at Dustin Stoltzfus and they're being like, man, he is just as good, if not better, than Fluffy Hernandez. So obviously he's going to do the exact same thing to Rodolfo Vieira, and he's an easy dog. I disagree. The reason Fluffy Hernandez was a good dog against Rodolfo Vieira is because, number one, he has slick submission defense. You're not choking that guy out. The second piece was the gas tank. Fluffy Hernandez pushes one hell of a pace in his fights, Dan. He is always working. He is always moving. He's attack, attack, attack. Rodolfo Vieira reminds me a lot of Yoel Romero. He's an explode and reload type of fighter. All power, all muscle on everything. He gets in on those hips. He slams you to the floor. He secures a position, and then he needs about 10, 15 seconds to breathe. And that's how he can continue in a fight. If he gets those moments to suck some wind, slow the pace down, catch his breath, he will stay in the fight. What Fluffy did was made sure he never got a second to breathe. Fluffy constantly made him work, constantly made him scramble. And then when Vieira was unable to hold this guy down, he was getting punched in the face. And he just could not keep pace with this kid. Dustin Stoltzfus is very, very paced, my friend. He has a classic tall Muay Thai style, and he very slowly marches forward on his opponents. He's extremely measured. And on top of that, he's another big muscly guy that really relies on his power for his takedowns. And one of his main offenses is his kicks. If you give me a guy who has a slow measured pace and is going to go muscle for muscle on takedown offense versus defense against Rodolfo freaking Vieira, I'm on Vieira all day. Because if it's muscle versus muscle, I know exactly who is going to win that battle. And if you've got a guy who throws kicks, which puts you off balance and gives the opportunity for a real easy single or double leg entry, I think that it's just a beautiful piece of matchmaking by the UFC to get a guy like Rodolfo Vieira, a winnable opponent, and get him right back on track. Rodolfo Vieira does average 7 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 47% accuracy. Absolutely phenomenal numbers from a grappling perspective. And Dustin Stolfus is a guy that he's coming off of a fight with Dawkins. And let me tell you, man, time after time after time, trying to get in and scramble with a guy like Dawkins, he stuck his neck right in there for a guillotine. I think this guy is overly confident in his grappling game, even though he's got some good balance and he's got some good hips. I just think it all perfectly syncs up for an opportunity to get back on the train with Rodolfo Vieira. Tell me, poke some holes in my argument, man. Let me know where I'm off here, because I seem to be on an island backing the minus 250 Rodolfo Vieira.
I was coming back your way there. Again, you're too damn convincing, Clint. But no, my initial lean here is that the pick's going to be Vieira for the reasons you said, and kind of for the fight that you laid out. But I think that I'm just guilty of, and I don't even think I even took any of the action. And props to you. That was a great pick with the fluffy. I didn't think I took any of the action of that, but I just feel like I did. You know what I'm saying? I almost feel burned. Like I can't trust this guy from a betting perspective. So maybe it's a bit of that. But to your point, from what I remember being live at Stolfus's Contender Series, and watching his fights since, he seems a little bit too content with being on bottom. Now, if you look at the submissions that he's been able to get, like guillotines, leg locks, perhaps that's why, right? That's his game. And like you said, he's very comfortable. A lot of guys that are conservative and comfortable, they probably have good submission defense. Now, could they be too comfortable against a world-class talent like Vieira? Sure. And maybe that's how Rodolfo gets him here. I'm going to have to go back and brush up on their last fights just to do my due diligence. But I'm picking Vieira here and was staying the heck away. But, maybe I'll keep your viewpoint in mind, because in hindsight, this could be another hindsight spot, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, man, Dan, I got to tell you, this is I live and die by being contrarian in these positions. And guys, there's a reason he's a minus 250 favorite. I know. So, and here's the problem. I was contrarian last time. Everybody else has the recency bias of their parlay busting. Everybody else is looking in hindsight and going, that guy's got a bad gas tank. That guy's a bad striker. And that may be true, but it was the matchup. We got to remember, MMA is paper, rock, scissors. Like, it all comes down to the matchup. And I think Dustin Stolfus is nowhere near the fighter that Fluffy Hernandez is. And you may say Dustin would beat Fluffy. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying Dustin Stolfus is not as good as Fluffy. I'm saying he's not the same fighter that Fluffy is. And Fluffy can push a pace like nobody's business, and that is the biggest problem for Rodolfo Vieira. A big, slow-moving target in the UFC apex. Vieira's going to have no problem pushing this guy up against the fence and then getting him to the ground from there, in my opinion.
Don't disagree.
Let's go, man. All right. I was a little scared. I was like, all right, like I have no problem being against the public, but when my guest comes on and they're like, Clint, you're nuts.
No, you're not. Not necessary, man. You're not necessary, man.
All right, man. I've been waiting since you teased for this fight. Up next, we've got Jeremy Little Heathen Stevens taking on none other than Mateus Gamrot. That came out as Gaius, by the way, for everybody wondering.
Hashtag that one. Jeez.
Oh, little slip of the tongue there. All right, my bad. So we've got Mateus Gamrot taking on Jeremy Stevens in what is Jeremy Stevens' lightweight debut. He moonlighted at 145 for a very long time. He's getting a little long in the tooth. He's on a bad losing streak, 0-4-1 in his last 5, unless you count his stunning victory over Drakkar Klose, in which case he is 1-4-1. And oh man, can I just say, Dan, I was chomping at the bit to pound Jeremy Stevens by knockout when he fought Drakkar Klose. I am so beyond angry that he shoved him at the weigh-ins, because I knew Close was not ready for that comeback, and I knew Jeremy Stephens moving up to 155 was going to power punch the hell out of that kid's head, and they robbed me of easy money. The fact that he got whiplash from a push, oh, he wasn't making it around. That fight was going to be over so fast. I'm so pissed off because the COVID era has not been kind to me, damn. There have been 4 or 5 spots that have just been absolute hammer smash spots that I've been robbed of because of, the corners popping for COVID, or, something happened that the fight falls apart. And that's one of them. I will never forgive the gods of MMA from taking that opportunity away from me.
I'm completely with you there. I'm a Jeremy Stephens backer in a lot of the spots where no one backs him. I'm even when I'm not picking the guy, I feel like I'm still defending his liveliness. So you're not going to get any hate from me there. I'm definitely with you on this. I am curious, on your take on this one, because I haven't done my full deep dive. But you know me, I love looking at southpaw action. Of course, Gamrot. I'm going to say the first name because now I'll slip and say it too. Gamrot. He is a southpaw. Of course, he was able to get a knockout. Not without, there's some things to take away from that fight, with that Holtzman fight, and I'm definitely going to go dive back into that one. So you look at Jeremy Stephens, and it's crazy. He actually hasn't technically fought a dedicated southpaw since my favorite hook knockout of all time, when he fought Yves Edwards, suffering a check hook knockout. Jeremy Stephens, for y'all, you have to go way back for his UFC southpaw record, but he is 3-3. But it's deceptive, right? Because Marcus Davis is one of those wins. I was at that live, great card, UFC 125. And it was one of those where I thought, essentially Marcus Davis was boxing Jeremy Stephens, if memory serves, to the point where I felt like he was well on a way to a decision. And I think I got up to, go, maybe get a drink, the little boys' room, whatever it was. And I'm like, this fight's done. And I get up and I see on one of the monitors right when I step out of the arena part into the concession part, and you just see Davis just getting lit up at the very end of the round 3, right? So it's really deceptive. You got Justin Buchholz, which was a doctor stoppage, and the other win, of course, is Rafael dos Anjos. Who could forget that? But you got to go way back to UFC 91. So he hasn't had southpaw looks in over a decade. Even when Max fought him, I believe it was mainly from orthodox. So it's going to be real curious for me how Jeremy Stephens does that. I know Dom Cruz will switch to that stance sometimes, but he's not exactly a great analog, because he seems like a guy that only does Dom Cruz in the gym. So that's going to be the big question for me here, is how does Jeremy Stephens do against the southpaw? Because I'm leaning Gamrot here.
Okay, man. I am right there with you. I called that knockout over hot sauce. And it's funny because you kind of can't script any 2 fights the same, right? And I talked about how Mateusz Gamrot has an extremely underrated right hand. He sets it up very well, and that was a big hole in the game of hot sauce Holtzman. So I told everybody to watch out for that right hand. I was on Gamrot big. And I'm kind of going to go right back to that well here. If you go back and you watch the last couple of Jeremy Stephens fights, and especially the fight with Calvin Kattar, it's the right hand. He never has a defense for it, and he's a take one to give one fighter. Stephens is a guy that plods forward heavy on his hands. He wants to brawl. He wants to push the pace. He is always going to have that striker's chance. He's always going to have that punch-out chance. But he does not protect against the right hand, and Gamrot's right hand is a freaking missile, man. I kind of feel like the exact same situation happens here. He's going up a weight class at the end of his career, which is something I always argue against. When you're at the end of your career, once you start hopping weight classes looking for success, that's really the beginning of the end. It's not going to get much better from here. It's only going to go downhill from here. Now, Jeremy Stephens may have a little bit better durability going up 10 pounds. Maybe he hits a little harder going up 10 pounds. But I think the book is out on how you beat this guy. And I think Mateusz Gamrot is a guy that's slick enough on the feet to be able to avoid the big winging bombs of Jeremy Stephens coming in here looking to try and get this thing into a war. Drakkar Klose was going to give Jeremy Stephens exactly the fight that he wanted, exactly the fight that he needed. Gamrot is not going to do that. On top of that, you can mix in the fact that Gamrot is one of these ATT boys that we're talking about on this week's card. He knows how to get in there and hit that ankle pick. He knows how to change levels and surprise you by mixing in that grappling. And we have seen Jeremy Stephens be on the wrong side of some takedowns. He's got a 65% takedown defense rating. I know he's been fighting the best that 145 really has to offer in the last little bit of his run, but Gamrot is a guy that I think is knocking the door of the top 5 or top 10 at 155. He's headed the right direction. He's a guy that potentially would be a challenger for the belt one of these days. He's got all the tools. He's there. And this is going to be a southpaw versus orthodox matchup where we know that power right hand is going to be right down the pipe. It's available. It's there. I see a right hand clubbing of Jeremy Stephens, whether or not he finishes up with a sub on the ground or goes for the ground and pound. I really like Gamrot here, and I know I'm kind of heavily exposed on this card in a couple of spots already, but I'm considering laying the hammer, man. I'm really considering just playing Gamrot straight and dropping like 4 units to win 2 on this guy from a straight perspective. I definitely think that he's the right side, and I think Jeremy Stephens' troubles continue.
Yeah, I guess last I'll say on this is I really got to go back to watch that Holtzman fight. I've got a lot of the regional stuff in my head on Gamrot. I know he can switch stances sometimes, but you know, fighting open stance will definitely be the best bet if you look at Jeremy Stephens' history and the kicks coming his way. I think with the low singles that he takes, he could parlay some catch kicks into some finishes of the takedowns if he wants to point fight. Maybe if the knockout comes, it comes. Otherwise, I think Gamrot could certainly win this in the cards. I don't hate though. Last thing I'll say is I don't hate Jeremy Stephens going up to 155 though. I do like that move. I just worry more about his mileage, and I'll leave it at this, folks. Yeah. Jeremy Stephens made his debut when Chuck Liddell was still the champion. Now he lost it that night, but just that sentence alone, he made his debut when Chuck Liddell was still the champion. So there's a lot of miles there, folks.
That is, yeah, man. That's yikes. He has been around for a very long time. I'll miss when he's gone. I'll be honest. Jeremy Stephens, very exciting fighter, fun guy to watch, always brings the heat. So it will be a bummer when he hangs it up, but I just think this is a bad matchup for him coming up a weight class. And, you and I touched on the mentality of a fighter. We listened to the fighter interviews, see where these guys are at. And Jeremy Stephens legitimately is taking that shove of Drakkar Klose as a win. I don't know if you've heard his interview recently, but this guy sounds like he's coming off of a knockout win rather than coming off of an 0-4 skid. He really is feeling himself in that spot, and you got to have confidence. I mean, if you're going to be a professional fighter, you've got to have that self-belief. But at the same time, in this particular spot, I feel like he's a little high on himself for where he is right now. He might want to come in. Maybe the right word? I'm not sure. Like, I know you got to have that heat. You got to bring that fire. But at the same time, necessarily feel like he should be the guy walking in with everything on fire behind him, mic dropping.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we just talked about it with Hardy, and again, even though I defend Stephens, I do feel like the chickens are coming home to roost. I picked Calvin Kattar, and I picked him by vicious knockout. So I think I wouldn't be surprised if the bottom drops out here. Yeah,
man. And I mean, Calvin Kattar, it reminds me a little bit of Gamrot in similar styles. I mean, obviously, Kattar's probably a little bit more on the boxing side, more volume, but the way they move, the way they strike, it feels very similar to me.
Yeah, a little hop in their step, sure.
Yeah. All right, hey everybody, we are almost there. We are at the co-main event of the evening, and the return of none other than Cupcake Miesha Tate. She's taking on Marion Renault, and a fight that, man, I'll fully admit I never expected I would be talking about on a podcast. Right when I got started doing the podcasting stuff, Miesha Tate was well on her way out of the game. We have not seen her in a very, very long time. Since 2016, we haven't seen Miesha Tate. And Marion Renault, while I love the hell out of this chick, she has a body that I aspire to at the age of 44. She's in incredible shape. She's a warrior. She comes to fight every single time. She's on a 4-fight losing skid. And man, this is her retirement fight. It's been a while, and this card seems to bring out all of my old sayings. But we haven't had a fighter that's been on paper retiring in a while. You don't bet on retiring fighters. I see some love for Marion Renault in the betting market. She opened up as a slightly bigger dog, and they've kind of bet her down. It looks like Miesha Tate is sitting around minus 135, minus 140-ish. You can get her minus 125 in some places, but even money plus 100 on Marion Renault after open up plus 115. I think people are banking on the rust of Miesha Tate being an issue here. And man, I'm not going to try to get technical. There's not a lot that I can talk to you about this fight because we have not seen Miesha Tate in so long. We don't know what she's really bringing to the table. Marion Renault's got good boxing. She's got good takedown defense. She's crazy physically strong, but she's 44 freaking years old, and she's ready to hang it up. You can't bet on that fighter in this position. So it's Miesha Tate or pass for me. And regardless of how rusty Miesha Tate may be, I think she can simply physical her way to a decision here. She's never been a stranger to muscling her opponents up against the fence, pinning them against the cage, and just grinding and wearing on them, and then using her grappling. She's got some pretty underrated submissions. You know, we saw her get Holly Holm with that crazy rear naked choke to win the title. I could see something like that coming into play here. She's got a good body triangle. She backpacks people. I think the grappling really is the key and the path for Miesha Tate, and against an opponent like Marion Renault, where there's no real threat coming at you, right? Like, she's got good boxing, but she's not going to knock you out. She's going to be safe to get in there, get those rounds, get those minutes, and if all else fails, she's the bigger woman. She's going to be 9 years younger than her opponent. She should be able to just outmuscle her when there's a problem. So I don't know that I'm betting it because, again, a 2016 layoff, but for me, it's got to be Miesha Tate at a short price or pass.
I completely agree, and it seems kind of crazy, and I'm actually working on a piece as far as layoff goes, because, Clinton, you remember this, man. It felt like, we're always spouting, ring rust, about that 9 to 12-month mark, and I feel like we're saying that a lot less for a reason, and I feel like the results, which I'm working on a piece to actually back this up right now and track these long layoffs, I think that's becoming less of a factor. And I think that has to do with fighters being smarter and knowing what to do, especially when these fighters are doing analyst roles and certain other roles outside of the sport. Cruz and another guy who is amongst those who have made successful comebacks off long layoffs, right? And we can get into the weeds with that. I'll just use that for a tease for my article. But I'll save the techniques for this, is that basically the biggest question mark for Tate is on the feet. Even of, her 3 submission losses, which is a submission loss, and maybe you could argue Renault's best path. But the thing is that those 2 were Ronda Rousey and Ronda Rousey's prime. And the other one was Amanda Nunes, who's not just Amanda Nunes, but she busted up Tate's nose, right? Because of that. And we saw Raquel Pennington kind of touch that nose up a bit. And Raquel Pennington is kind of the opposite of Marion Renault in the sense that they make fights close, except Pennington makes fights close for the better from her standpoint. Whereas Renault makes fights close for the worse from her standpoint. She'll give bad positions. She'll stop throwing that counter right hand, which is going to be your best bet in this fight, is that counter right hand. But here's the thing, without looking, Clint, in Renault's last 10 fights, how many of those fights have she been taken down if you had to guess?
Oh, if I had to guess?
Yeah.
I'd say, 60% of them.
100%. She's been taken down in all 10 of her last 10. That includes That includes a fight with Holly Holm, folks. Holly Holm 1-0, one to Zilcher in takedowns as well. So she's been taken down at least once in all of her fights. Now she's competent, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt off of her back. But if you were to say, would you feel better about Miesha winning this fight on the feet or on the floor? I think obviously is on the floor. Would you feel a lot better if you had a bet on Miesha and they ended up on the floor? Yeah. I'd feel a lot better about it too.
I'd feel a lot better.
and say what you will about Miesha layoffs or the divisions of MMA, whether it's men's heavyweight or certain female divisions, whether it's like featherweight or not as stacked ones. The point is MMA is getting better all around, and submissions from guard are becoming much less of a thing. So this could be a real hindsight price. I don't blame anybody who jumped on early. You can still get the same opener roughly right now. It's Miesha Tate for me or pass as well. I'm biased, though. I'm biased here. Got to state that.
I don't blame you, man. And this is very much a person who I would love to see make that comeback and do it in spectacular fashion. Former champion, really almost a Michael Bisping story. You know, that fighter that was always right there but never quite got it. And then she got that ridiculous comeback win for the title, got the belt put around her waist one time before she hung it up. It was such an amazing moment and a great story. And I hate when fighters, you know, have that comeback that they really don't necessarily need. But Miesha Tate was so young at that point. She went off and did some stuff. She came back. She's 34 now. We've got plenty of active women's roster members that are 34. She has a couple more good years in her if she really wants to put it in. So I would love to see her come back and get this win and really just kind of get back to work in the division. We'll see what ends up happening on Saturday. I kind of feel like minus 125 is a bit of a gift. I know the sharps out there are going to be all over Marion Renault here in this spot, but I feel like this entire fight, guys, don't expect this one to be fun. I think Miesha Tate is going to get her minutes in. I think she's going to pin this girl up against the cage. I think it'll hit the mat unless she manages to get a rear naked choke or something like that. I don't see there being any type of a finish, and I think it's a long, dragging fight. But I will admit that 9-1 on Miesha Tate by submission has me a little curious.
Wow, I really like that too. She's a fantastic grappler. She's got a mean squeeze too, man. Legit tap me from a half guard in a position that like men haven't been able to tap me from. Like, holy crap. Not that I'm any kind of barometer, by the way. I'm just saying she's a mean grappler. I see her pick apart plenty of dudes who are way better than myself.
I feel you. Have you done any work or grappling with Miesha Tate? Have you run into her around the gym or anything like that recently? Like, have you seen her at all in the lead up to this fight?
Not recently. So I'll just close off with the last thing because that ties right into it, Clint, is she is working with good people and established connections from strength and conditioning, MMA, boxing. So I don't have any issue with who she selected as coaches, but this will be the first fight since Rousey Tate 2 that she won't have her chief corner, the late great, my former coach as well, the late great Robert Follis will not be there. Could that be an X factor? You know, Brian Caraway wasn't great for it. We saw late great Sean Tompkins. All his fighters went on a notable skid after, you know, their first fights without the coach. It's been a while now. It's been 5 years, almost as long as their layoff to process those emotions. But I gotta state it.
Oh, it's a valid point, man. I'm really glad that you brought it up. But one thing that I would say is anybody very interested in Miesha Tate and kind of what I'm talking about, just that power angle, just go look at her Instagram. She is in filthy shape right now, man. She is putting up more weight than I don't even have a comparison to make because I don't want to make a poorly worded comparison here at the end of the show, trip at the finish line. But she is in redonkulous shape, and that's the calling card of Marion Renault is that she's physically stronger than her opponents, and that's really what keeps her in those fights. I think that might be a problem for her in this one.
Absolutely, because she does a disservice by, you know, giving positions that takes away her strength. Now she's going to give position to a stronger and just as good a grappler. Not good on paper. We'll see how it plays out, but not good on paper.
Exactly. All right, so we agreement here on buy low on Miesha Tate. I don't know if that one will make my card because I am trying to tighten up ever so slightly this week and make sure I cash in on a win for this card. But that one might make it, especially after talking it through with you, man. I feel like it just makes too much sense. Retiring fighter versus live comeback fighter, best shape of her life, just seems to make sense. All right, so what we've got going on here, everybody. Now, I'm going to have to yell at somebody over at Pub Sports Radio. I don't know what happened to my commercials. I don't know if maybe we're mixing up our sponsors or something like that, but the only one I've got to play for you is our PSR Live commercial for sponsors. So let's go ahead and give that a roll right here before the main event.
Where's the bang bang, Preston? Come on.
I can't breathe.
Pub Sports Radio. Come find us in Southtown 101. Subscribe on YouTube and all platforms where podcasts are found.
All right, there you go, everybody. PubSportsRadio.com. We've got 242 live viewers hanging out in the chat with us today. Thank you all so much for spending your Monday nights here with us. I'm joined by my man, Dan Tom MMA. Make sure you give him a shout out and a follow. Right after this show ends, We got the home run derby going on, folks. So if you want to watch none other than the man Otani waxing balls out of the park right here at Pub Sports Radio, they're live betting that bad boy and watching it over there. Main event breakdown, folks. Islam Makhachev taking on Thiago Moises. Makhachev is 19-1, Moises 15-4, and Islam Makhachev is crowned by none other than Khabib himself. He has been anointed the next champion of 155. He's the successor. We expect big things from this man. Thiago Moises, one of those guys that I have routinely attempted to fade and has bit me square in the ass. We've got Islam Makhachev minus 750 at this point. Plus 490 is the comeback on Thiago Moises. And man, Dan, I will keep this one short and sweet for you because I, for some reason, suddenly felt like I should be betting on Thiago Moises this week. It's the gambler in me. It's the dog hunter in me. I saw plus 450 on Moises and went, oh, that's an easy dog or pass spot. And then I went into the tape and I dug in and I went, holy shit. First off, why, after I've faded this guy and looked for an opportunity to get one over on him for the last 3 years of his career, am I going to decide that he steps up in competition massively and that's the time to get behind him? I'm just, you know what? I'm going to, real quick, just, no! No!
Yeah.
I was like, what are you doing? So, no, I will not be backing Thiago Moises as an underdog on Saturday. Islam Makhachev averages 3.46 takedowns per 15 minutes with a 93% accuracy. If this man wants you on the mat, you're going on the mat. And if you go back and you watch Thiago Moises' game, man, he has a 63% takedown defense. He got absolutely smothered by Beneil Dariush, and I thought he lost the fight against Bobby Green quite handily. One of the worst judges' scorecards I think we've had in a decent bit, just because he was moving forward in that fight. Islam Makhachev is the dark horse at 155. We're going to be talking about him in the top 3 here in the very near future. Thiago Moises predicting a knockout of this kid. Don't make me laugh. He's going to close the range, get the takedown, and then Moises is going to have to play off his back. And like you mentioned, those submissions from guard and MMA are disappearing. I fully expect Islam Makhachev to work this kid for 25 minutes, Dan. How do you feel about this fight?
Yeah, I'm currently balls deep, if you will, on this one. I haven't finished the tape study on it, but my read's coming around, and you know the line is going to make everybody want to go for the dog, and I don't blame them. And it is a dog or pass, but I'm liking Makhachev here. I think that I was a bit surprised there wasn't as much shot takedowns as I remember. However, he's so darn good at chaining. Once he snatches up a leg or gets to the clinch, it doesn't matter. And 2, considering that the guard submissions that Moises does are guillotines, heck, I want a guy who's going to get a fighter on one leg or take them down from the clinch. Your neck is not in trouble, as opposed to shot takedowns. It actually would be worse. So I actually like how the grappling styles mesh up. The striking is going to be tricky because on one hand, part of the reason why I too, up until last time, I switched at the right time and was able to cash and make up for the robbery, if you will, that I was on the wrong side of too. I backed my boy Bobby Green there. But before that, the reason why is because Moises did not do too good against southpaw strikers. All the way back against Robert Watley, who's a southpaw, Jason Knight, who fought at a southpaw, I believe, back then. And then you get to his UFC fights against Beneil Dariush. I know, again, like you said, Beneil wrestled him there, which is another path to victory here. And Michael Johnson as well. I picked and didn't play Michael Johnson. But even though Michael Johnson did Michael Johnson things, before that, he was lighting him up again. And what is Michael Johnson? He is a southpaw. So it's going to be interesting. Makhachev, you know, he got knocked out early by Adrian Martins. A lot of these guys, they can be the Russian kryptonite. Carlos Diego Fajeda played that role. If these jiu-jitsu guys can play it right by either making their opponent, these Russian guys, pay for disrespecting them, like Martins did to Makhachev, or, you know, they kind of disrespect them in a good way, like I just referenced to Pedro Munoz with pressure. These guys, they can use their black belts as a threat, you know, and I'll be curious to see if Moises does that. His counter right hand and his hard right kick is going to be great for the open stance, but he also traditionally does worse in southpaw fights. He's getting better. So is Makhachev. Makhachev looking like a kind of a refined like Timur Valiev approach. He's going to be single shot, but he's going to vary. And it looks like he can point fight when he can't get it. So I think Makhachev's going to try to point fight early. He's going to have wrestling in his back pocket. But those counters will be live throughout. This is a fight where you sit back and take notes and learn about both fighters, because this fight's gonna teach us a lot, and you can profit down the line on either of them, because I think we're gonna get a lot of looks from both guys here.
Dan, that might be the smartest thing that you have said all night, and I can't agree with you more, man. I have no interest in betting this fight. Now, if you want to do the square parlay and get all these big favorites in a parlay up until the night, this is the easiest hedge spot you'll ever find. If you parlay everybody up and anchor it on Makhachev, and then you've got plus 500 on Thiago Moises to make sure you've got a good window where no matter who wins, you cash a ticket, this is the kind of card that you can absolutely do that with. But this line is so wide. Even though I fully expect Islam Makhachev to get this win here, I can't back him. And I don't want to be betting on the underdog in this particular fight because, like I've said, I've tried to fade this guy time and time and time again. I don't think he's the better striker. Yes, he's got that slick Brazilian jiu-jitsu game. I'm not seeing anybody subbing Islam Makhachev, so we'll see what happens. But this is a main event, man. This is a 5-round fight, and a lot of things change and a lot of things get hairy in these 5-round main events. So it's a big step up for both guys. Under the bright lights, let's see who really can work at the championship level. That's what this weekend is all about. There's too many questions for me. I will not be having a real bet on the main event this week.
100%, man. And these are sometimes the smartest things to do is to know when to pass. And something that, we both can raise our hand. We're degenerates at heart. I feel you, brother. I'm the same. I'm just as guilty. But, when we can, it doesn't hurt to exercise discipline. I think this is a spot.
Right? Just, man, we got to do baby steps. Just a little bit of discipline each week. I'm sure I'm going to add a couple of bets throughout the week. Not the first fight, not the last night, not the last fight this week. Everybody, that is it. That is your show. That is UFC Vegas 31. Thank you all so much for hanging with us this evening here on Pub Sports Radio. Like I mentioned, go check out that Home Run Derby if you need something to do for the rest of the evening. We appreciate you all. Get in that chat. Talk to me about your favorite picks for this week coming up. My guy, paused the show. Tajiki Bey flying in at the 10th hour here. Appreciate you for the donation, my friend. And, he says a little appreciation for the best of all time, the humble one, the one and only Tajiki Bey. Keep it up, Clint. I appreciate you, buddy. Always in here with the good stuff. All right, Dan, thank you so much for jumping on the show with me, man. Love chopping these fights up with you. It's a pleasure as always. Everybody show my guys some love. And Dan, the floor is yours. If there's anything you want to shout out, shows where they can find you, whatever, have at it, man.
No, man, the last commenter nailed it, man. You keep that good energy. That's why I love coming on here. I love chopping it up with you both on Twitter and on here. So the only thing I'll plug is just my Twitter, because that's where you can find everything for my podcast and my content. Let's just do a one-stop plug here at Dan Tom MMA. Feel free to bother me there. It's just a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me, Clint.
Thank you for coming as always, man. We will absolutely get you back on the show soon. Love having you, the positive energy you bring to the show. So thank you very much. Everybody else out there, I want to wish you a wonderful week. We do our best to brush off from the uninspiring end of UFC 264. Let's bounce back. Let's get some violence. Let's enjoy some lower level fights this week. We've got LFA coming back this week. Bellator coming back this week. So the degenerates have plenty to put their money on. You all have a good week. Good luck on everything that you may bet on. And make sure you tune into all the rest of the shows here at Pub Sports Radio. We will see you later on this week for the other good stuff. Have a great night. Let's roll.